multi-stakeholder groups. And it can start asking questions about, the values. If we're sort of setting up a multi-stakeholder group to make Irish design the most sustainable design-led nation in the world, who's actually informing and who's actually controlling the intentions and the values of that multi-stakeholder grouping, and who's actually putting sort of direction behind that multi-stakeholder grouping. I'm just interested, what are the values within the grouping? There's obviously the whole issue about different perceptions. I mean, even you sort of sit around the table this morning trying to come up with a single definition of what sustainable design is. It's not an easy practice, and one of the main reasons that people have very different perceptions about what sustainable design actually means. I think in our work we have to talk to policymakers, to small manufacturers, to educators, and to a whole range of different people, and it's trying to understand why people's different perceptions about sustainability and sustainable design informs their particular practice. And again, it's just an important consideration in multi-stakeholder groups. I was just going to put that one in, because sometimes it's about the different perceptions, it's not actually understanding what you're looking at, So it's like you can think you're looking at sustainable design, but you might be looking at either in the wrong direction or not looking at it all. So there's another issue, I suppose, in multi-stakeholder groups, is this idea of understanding trade-offs and negotiation, and it's things that designers do in teams anyway. But I'm just quite interested in that idea that if you sort of set out in a multi-stakeholder group, how do they know what decision and what direction to actually take? And I suppose this is part of the 24-hour design challenge. There's so many different directions that you can go in, and which light is pointing in the right direction. And I think it'd be quite interesting to sort of see how those kind of issues come out later on today. But I suppose, and it was mentioned very earlier on, the idea of co-development and co-production. No matter about what sustainable design is actually about, it is about people, and it's about engaging people. And the idea of co-development, setting out the right platforms, the right environments to allow that to happen, and that's part of the challenge. Is about how do you sort of set out those kind of platforms where you can have true co-development. Obviously, the slide earlier on about the global supply chain is a little bit more difficult, but maybe start asking questions within a region, within Ireland, or within one of the sub-regions of Ireland. What are the kind of platforms that can be put into place? It's a bit of a cheesy slide, but part of it is to recognise no matter what you're doing in terms of intervention, it's all about laying foundations. And when we look at sort of businesses and understanding how certain interventions have changed their design practice, quite often we recognise that some of the companies receive intervention 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and it can take time for things to actually kick into place. And if we're talking about systems, changing systems and systems practice, systems thinking would say we can't actually intervene in a system, but it's about sort of saying, well, what kind of activities can we do to put foundations for the platforms for future activity, for future sustainable design activity within a region. And it's going to have a quote. This quote kind of came from a slightly different context. It was about technology and changing roles of technology in design and consumption. But I just quite like the idea, because it seems that the issues seem to be coming up throughout the conversation today. So the context of design has been changing, and as designers, we also need empathy for individuals, but we also need to look at the collective. So this idea of trying to take in the collective perceptions and multi-stakeholder perceptions. So I'm going to leave it at that, and then I'm going to pass you over to Frank to set the challenge. If I can get this out of my pocket. So just clicking there.
Thanks, Simon. I'm going to try and set a challenge leading on from what Simon said, but also particularly from what's been said so far today, because there's a lot of really interesting threads going through today. But from my perspective, I suppose, to set the context for the challenge, I'm thinking, well, back in sort of the early 70s, a guy called Victor Papanek released a book called Design for the Real World. It's almost 40 years ago. 40 years ago, and we're still theorising about eco-design. Schumacher, Small is Beautiful, likewise. And some 40 years, I've been in the field for 20 years, and it makes me feel almost quite embarrassed thinking that 20 years I've been involved with it, how little change has actually happened. So from my perspective, I suppose in terms of the challenge, the one thing is, for years I've been saying eco-design is good design, and really, I've said it without really any sort of evidence. And for the last few years, myself and Simon have been fortunate enough to work with 4 businesses in Wales on a quite in-depth level. So we now know eco-design is good design and it's good business practice. But also, we know that there are loads of challenges. So the first thing is, if eco-design is good design, why isn't it mainstream? You know, why do we have design education still that has courses that are sort of, that's for the eco-design people and this is for the designers. And that runs across the board. So the first thing is, if eco-design is good design, let's make it good design, full stop. And the second thing is, from that perspective is, again, I have a strange background in terms of my experiences in terms of education and work and stuff. So it's a real kind of cluster of different sort of experiences. But I've always believed that designers have a key role to play. You know, and again, that's been sort of a gut feeling and instinct. And again, over the last few years, I suppose Simon, myself, and the rest of the team, I suppose we begin to show that, yes, designers can lead the way. But I find it quite disappointing when I come back to Ireland and find that a lot of the stuff that's been happening here is very sporadic and people aren't really working together. And one of the things we did over the last few years is we managed to get the 4 universities in Wales that offer design education. We got them to work together. Now, that should be an easy task, but obviously they're all sort of competing for the same students and curriculum and stuff. But over a period of 12 months with Simon leading the work, we managed them to kind of actually sit around the table and co-develop resources and actually realise that they can retain their own competitive advantage, but have a far better high quality product. So people can work together. So I think the second thing is, for us, I'd like to explore if designers can lead the way, and I believe that they can, but I'd like to say, well, you know, if it's their responsibility to take the lead role, you know, why in Ireland haven't we got any companies that are leading the way internationally? You know, why aren't companies in Ireland embracing this in a real holistic way? And so if design and designers can lead the way, and rather than just saying, okay, let's carry on the way we are and let's take over and let's do another event next year and see what happens, and you know, let's all work in our little silos, and design has become really a silo process because we're working in businesses. Designers only want to talk to the rest of people because they're too busy doing their design stuff. I think what we need to look at is, if design can lead the way, then the challenge is, let's really lead the way. Let's put design out there as a challenge that we can lead the way, and look at how, as designers, we can sort of create the process for co-development of where we want to go, set the journey and lead. So we need leaders as designers, and we need Ireland as a country, as a nation of people who are supposed to be creative and innovative, to actually take that lead role and believe that eco-design can be good design, and that Ireland can produce companies that can also lead the way internationally and actually can work together in partnership for the real world, for a better future. So I suppose we're always interested in this idea of making a difference, you know, and I suppose we're very good at coming up with ideas, but we're not as good as turning them into practice. And I think myself and Simon can hold our hands up as much as anyone else and say, well, actually, we haven't been the best in getting those ideas out there. But if design, and there's lots of things I'd like to say, obviously, in terms of, I think design education needs to change radically, but I think designers have a lot of core skills, but they also have transferable skills. And the whole idea of designers was to solve problems, to look at solutions. If we can look at the transferable skills, those transferable skills can run across different sectors. Myself and Simon, through persistence, but also through lots of luck as well on the way, have managed to try and get design into the policy agenda in Wales. It's a starting point. We've loads to go, but designers can work in terms of policy. They can work in terms of other aspects. So I think for us the challenge is, yes, if design, eco-design is good design, you know, if we agree that as a starting point, if we believe designers can take a lead role, let's take the lead role. Let's be proactive. Let's make it happen. Let's not just talk about it. Let's turn those ideas into reality. So our challenge basically is that. Can we really make a difference as designers, or should we actually be here today? You know, why do we start out to become designers, to sort of do a sort of day job and to get paid Monday to Friday 9 to 5 just to come home? And you know, designers, the whole idea was we're supposed to have passion. We're supposed to believe we can make things change. And I think companies have to take responsibility, society and culture has to take responsibility as well. But I think we can change things. I think we can actually turn things back around, and we can actually say, well, actually, the role of designer wasn't to sit inside an office and just do bits of drawings and fit part of the process. Design wasn't meant to be a linear process. It never was, and it shouldn't be. So I think our challenge is eco-design, good design, but likewise, if we believe that us as a group of design people are with an interest in design, if we can lead the way, let's put a system in place. Let's think about how we can, and let's make it happen. And set a challenge for us, not just for the next 24 hours, but for the next 6 months and the next year. And let's not come back in a year's time and say, well, actually, it would have been a good idea, but we didn't actually do anything about it. So that's my rant. Thank you.